Today I'm going to be talking about how I transformed and rewired my neural pathways to get from a position of helplessness where I didn't feel like I trusted myself, where I felt like there was something wrong with me, where I felt like I'd always relapse if my urges got too strong or I got triggered by anything. So that's where I was for like 10 years. Into a place where I do trust myself, I feel like there isn't anything wrong with me, I can deal with getting triggered by anything, I always feel in control of my choices, even if I experience strong desires, and I also don't feel like my sexual desires are abnormal in any way, and I feel completely in control of myself and totally trust myself. So how did I undergo all of this transformation? And we're not going to go into like complete details on every single thing that I've done, but I do want to talk a little bit about beliefs and thought patterns in particular and how you can rewire the brain and transform your thinking. But I think a good place to start is just where we all kind of began, right? Like most of us here probably started watching porn at a young age, probably like between the ages of maybe like 10 and 13 or so. I know some people will be younger as well, some people a little bit older, but most guys I work with anyway is between the ages of around 10 to 13. So back then, like before you knew about the consequences of porn, you probably felt like this is quite exciting, maybe your friends are doing it and you feel like it feels good. So, every time you have the urge or desire, maybe you're alone and your parents are out, you go, okay, I'm going to go and engage and watch some porn. So you engage, you have the urge, 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 you engage. This goes on for years and years, and basically your mind develops this psychological emotional dependency on a mind's mood altering experience. Basically you get addicted, like you start feeling like, okay, whenever I have the urge, like I'm not able to stop acting on that desire, and you start relapsing, and then you maybe go online and you're like, okay, I need to like solve this, and you get taught by everyone online that it's not good on some level to have these desires. Like you've got to try to get away from the desire. So they're talking about installing the blockers so you can't access it, talking about identifying and maybe removing the triggers, understanding what the root of the desire is. So people are looking at like loneliness, stress, tiredness, anxiety, all these different sort of feelings that people often have when they're in the addiction. And then there's often a lot of distraction and substitution techniques, things like going and doing some push-ups, taking a walk, exercising regularly, building a strong daily routine, practicing mindfulness or meditation. And then there's also people talking about like support groups, and there is a lot of support groups online and accountability buddies and all of this kind of stuff. So on some level, all of this education on porn addiction recovery is really kind of based in this idea that it's not a good thing if you have the desires. Like we've got to try to get away from the desires and reduce the desires and not get triggered, because if we get triggered, well, we're fucked. Like we're going to relapse. Like that's what the philosophy of the traditional like conventional recovery advice information is based in, and it's so based in helplessness. We talk about helplessness a lot, but I want to really get this across in this video because recently we've been roasting a few people online, like their advice and critiquing it and analysing it. We're not doing this from a bad place, but it's just we have to change our thought patterns. Like you have to change your beliefs and how you respond to desires if you want to rewire your brain and get to a really good position where you trust yourself, you feel like you can get triggered by anything and it just doesn't really matter. And this is like a non-issue in your life. Like you just feel good, you're not worrying about relapsing anymore. Like to get to that position, you have to change how you think about all of this. And if you continue thinking that if you get triggered, you're going to relapse, you continue thinking that there's something wrong with you for having compulsive desires, you continue thinking that, you need to be always distracting yourself from the urges, like you're not really going to get free. Like you're just going to kind of stay stuck with the same thought patterns, the same beliefs, doing the same strategies, because your behaviours, like your actions, are coming first. Like you're not thinking about the thoughts first, but your actions actually come from the thoughts. And so most of this like advice online, if we have a look at blockers, triggers, identifying them, like the journaling, calling someone, making a cup of tea, like doing push-ups, improving your sleep habits, like all of this stuff is about the action first. And so people are literally coming about the whole problem backwards. Like they're doing it the wrong way around. So they're focusing on changing your action without first changing your mindset, like changing how you think, changing your beliefs, and actually building a system where you can think through the choice rationally like you would any other problem in life. Let's say you had a big scary business decision to make. Let's say it's, I don't know, you're hiring someone new and it's a really critical decision. You're hiring like a new CEO for a business or whatever. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to like just kind of start thinking, oh, I wonder where this, this is like the kind of mindfulness or like meditation sort of technique of like, oh, I wonder where this feeling is in my body, is it in my head? Is it in my chest, and does it feel tight? How's my breathing right now? Like, you wouldn't do that like with any other decision. Like, if you were hiring like a new CEO for a business, you wouldn't try and solve that problem by doing this like mindfulness stuff. Like, you would just solve the problem, which is actually making that decision in that moment. And this is the weird thing about addiction recovery, is like it really comes down to choices and like making rational choices. And yet for some reason everyone online is like pushing all these ideas that are to do with self-improvement but don't really have anything to do with you actually having a choice moment by moment. And me saying it like this, it may become a bit more clear to you. But yeah, let's go back to, you're in the addiction. What's going on? Well, let's say your mindset and your beliefs are like a scale, and you're either going to have the addictive part of the mind in control or you're going to have the rational part of the mind in control. And every strategy online is really either going to like push the scales in one way or the other. It's going to like reinforce helplessness and keep the addictive part of the mind in control on some level, or it's going to help you feel more in control of yourself and feel like you do trust yourself and you can deal with compulsive desires. So the scales are not like neutral either. It's either going to go up or it's going to go down one way or the other. And if you have a look at the thought patterns when you're in the addiction, like what the real problem is when you're in the addiction, certain thoughts you're going to have is like they're filled up through your experience, and this is usually due to relapsing over and over and over. But the certain thought patterns you're going to have is like, I don't trust myself, there's something wrong with me, I can't deal with getting triggered, I don't trust myself, I already said that one. My sexual desires are not normal, they're too much and out of control. So these are the beliefs, these are the thoughts, and it's like these get compounded over time. Like the more you relapse, the more you're going to compound these beliefs, this mindset, your whole paradigm of the problem. This is just going to get compounded more and more over time. And then, if this is the problem though, like if you feel like I will relapse if my urges get too strong, or you feel like I can't deal with getting triggered, and that's really the problem, because if you think in that way, then you probably are going to relapse, right? And then you go online and it's like, okay, how do I solve porn addiction? And basically all the advice is just reinforcing the same thought patterns on some level by also saying to you, don't get triggered, like put blockers in place, like you can't access this stuff, which isn't actually true because you always can access it. It's just going to compound the problem. And so your addiction is going to get worse and worse and worse. It's not neutral. Like me going online as a 16-year-old and trying to solve my erectile dysfunction problem, that's kind of what led me to taking in all this advice that in hindsight was nonsense, made my problem worse because I was focusing on the behaviour instead of my mindset, and therefore deepening my porn addiction like 1,000,000%, and like getting into like really, really quite novel content online, feeling a shit ton of shame, and really compounding the thought and the belief in particular, which was like, is there something wrong with me? Like there is something wrong with me. Like that's how I felt, I felt like there is something wrong with me. And like, if you fully trusted yourself, just think about this for a moment. If you fully trusted yourself to deal with this problem correctly, you had 100% self-trust, would you install blockers? Like if you 100% trusted yourself, would you have parental controls in place? Like would you feel like every time you have an urge you need to go for a walk? Would you feel like you need to do some push-ups? Would you feel like you need to identify your triggers and journal about them? Or would you just be like, okay, if I have a desire, I'll deal with it as and when. I'll make a decision. I'll make a choice in that moment. Well, yeah, you just make the choice and then move on with your day. Because you would trust yourself, if you actually realise that all of this was a choice and that you're acting on your thoughts and your beliefs, and what's going on in your mind is really the problem, not what's going on externally, with like Instagram. People think that, oh, the problem is that there's all these OnlyFans women on Instagram. That's why I keep relapsing. Like, you're never going to get free if that's your thought pattern, unless all the OnlyFans women move off Instagram. Like, if your reality in your mind and your beliefs and your thoughts are kind of creating your reality, and if your thought patterns are, okay, I keep relapsing because of OnlyFans women, you're going to keep relapsing until the OnlyFans women aren't on Instagram, and that may never happen. And so you're basically determining your own mental stability, your own life, on external factors, which is really not a good way to live. So instead, what we want to do, take back control of our own mind by realizing that we do have a choice, and our reality is created by us, not some random mystical external force. It's all up to us. It's our choice. So we definitely have to unlearn a lot of shit if we want to overcome porn addiction, because a lot of the internet information makes the problem worse. It's not neutral, it makes it worse. That's my experience. That's the experience of, hundreds of guys that I've worked with as well. So what did I do? How did I actually rewire my neural pathways? Well, obviously I learned the Beyond Compulsion method. I got really lucky. I learned this from a woman called Mary Paulus, who's worked in addiction recovery for over 36 years now. She taught me this method of actually changing my neural pathways and feeling like I did have a choice and thinking through that choice rationally. I wasn't trying to identify how fast my breathing was, how shallow it was, the depth of it. I wasn't trying to just observe the urge and call it a certain colour or an animal or try to describe how the urge felt in my body. That's not how you make a good rational choice. You wouldn't do that across other areas of your life. So instead it was just about basically reading a bit of paper that goes, okay, I've got this desire right now. There's nothing wrong with me for having this desire. Obviously my neural pathways were wired this way from a very young age, and I'd consumed all this information online that was really bad and made the problem worse. So I'd, think through that desire, actually get connected to it. Instead of running away, trying to remove the triggers, it's no, I've got the opportunity here to actually think this through rationally for myself. That's how I've got to this position where I have complete self-trust and I no longer worry about relapsing. It's because I've dealt with the desires so many times, probably over 1,000 times, and I take complete pride in that. That's awesome. It's so good to be able to deal with my own desires and just know with certainty that I'll never get out of control because I've mastered that skill, gone through it so many times. And it is uncomfortable. I'm not acting like some easy thing to do here. This isn't for everyone. This really, really isn't for everyone. A lot of people would rather live with comfortable lies than face the uncomfortable truths. And so if you really want to change, you're going to have to face some very, very hard truths. That is the reality. And it was for me. And when I first did all this training with Mary, I had so much resistance as well. I didn't want to believe what she was saying. But the experience that I've had over the last 2 years has just shown what is true and what is false. So I've rewired these neural pathways by dealing with the desires rationally, thinking through the choice over and over and over. And then what's happened is my thought patterns, my beliefs, my whole paradigm with regards to this whole problem has just completely transformed. I've gone from I don't trust myself to I do trust myself. I've gone from I can't deal with getting triggered to I can deal with getting triggered because I have been triggered by many things. And the triggering, again, it's just neural pathways that are wired in your mind. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. And you can deal with this if you have the right training and you know how. I've gone from there is something wrong with me to there is nothing wrong with me. And I've gone from my sexual desires are not normal, they're too much, they're out of control, to my sexual desires are normal, I am in control. And finally, I will relapse if my urges get too strong, to I always will be in control of my choices, even if I experience strong desires. And there's countless more thought patterns and beliefs that I've transformed since I've rewired my neural pathways. So many. And that's been through reinforcing the same way of thinking, which is the Beyond Compulsion method way of thinking, just over and over and over. And it is quite simple, but it's really about the repetition. And I've been lucky to work with Mary for a long time and just lock in and just go all in on one method. And that's what's really transformed my life, I believe. So during this time, as I say, it's not been completely easy, but to kind of go from one thought pattern into another and change your paradigm, you do have to take some action. And the problem with porn addiction recovery, again, is that a lot of people are too passive. And this isn't necessarily their fault. It's just people online are teaching them the wrong shit. And the general approaches are way too passive. It's all about kind of getting away from the desire. As I say, it's about just kind of sitting back and hoping you one day have no desires anymore and that your mind's transforms because you're on a long no-fap streak. But that isn't going to happen. You've got to take action. You've got to really think through your choice over and over and over and get those reps in. A bit like if you wanted to get stronger, you wanted to change your physical body, you would have to get some reps in. Like, you'd have to go and work out your muscles. Like, you'd have to change your body. You'd have to put in some action. It's the same with addiction recovery. Like, you're gonna have to put in reps. Like, and then the reps that we do is reinforcing new ways of thinking over and over and over. And the best time to put in these reps is when you're actually experiencing the urge, when you're experiencing the compulsive desire. That's when you would go to some rationale, like a bit of paper with some actual really solid education on it, and think through the choice. So this bit of paper, we called it like an A4. It's a 5-fact script, right? I was going to say A4 piece of paper, but I realised in the States and in different bits of the world, you don't really know. You don't have like A4 necessarily, but it's just like a bit of paper. So it's not that big. You'd go to this bit of paper, you'd think through the choice, and you do this over and over and over, urge after urge after urge. You know, you make the choice, you make the choice, you make the choice, and because you've like experienced the urge so many times and dealt with it correctly, this is how your beliefs, this is how your paradigm, this is how your neural pathways, this is how everything transforms. So it's the same for every single one of these thoughts, these beliefs. And that's how you can get to a position where you just completely trust yourself, is by experiencing the desire without acting on it over and over and over. And I believe like what happens at the start, and this isn't like exactly accurate, it doesn't really matter, but like at first I felt like the urges were quite scary, well, very scary actually, and that was just because the scales were so weighted in a particular way. Like the addictive part of the mind was so in control when I first started using the script and changed my neural pathways. That first, like the urges were really scary because I just hadn't had many reps of the script. Like I hadn't actually used a method to actually deal with the desire that many times. So at first it can feel really scary, but you make your choice, you experience the discomfort, and it's only temporary discomfort, you rewire the brain a little bit, and then, you know, it just gets less and less scary and the desires sort of get less and less strong, and then it gets to a point where it's just like, oh yeah, it's a little desire, like it's an urge, like bring it on. Like you don't really care if you have them or not. And I mean, they're a bit annoying, like I'm not gonna lie, I still sometimes have desires and it's a bit like, oh god, like here's a desire, but it's just not really an issue. It's like you wouldn't think about, oh, I need to go to the toilet to like go for a wee. Like you probably wouldn't think like, oh, what am I gonna do if I need a wee? Like you just go to the bathroom and use the toilet, right? I feel like at this point, that's kind of how desires are for me. It's like probably a lot less frequent, but you also just like, you're not thinking, how do I deal with this problem anymore? It's just like, if I have a desire, I know what to do. I'll crack on. And they're completely different to how they were at first. Like the intensity, the strength of them, like the feeling that they had on me, like it's just so different. Like, it's really hard to describe. And it's not really so much about porn anymore either. It's just I've kind of leveled up. So now I would use the script for other behaviours, like maybe just like checking my phone or checking emails, like checking maybe my WhatsApp messages. Like it's just really shit like that, to be honest, that I'd kind of use the script for now, because you start to realise that you can apply the method for basically any single behaviour you want to stop in your life, which is pretty cool. So anyway, you have these choices, and they are choices. What you do is, you start to reinforce new ways of thinking, you rewire the brain, and you get to a position where you do trust yourself and you feel like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. My sexual desires are normal. I am in control of myself. I can deal with getting triggered, and the scales completely tip. And your new paradigm, like the new belief system you have, the new thoughts you have, is just filled up because it's been compounded over time by the script use, like by repeatedly changing your neural pathways, dealing with the urges correctly, actually getting connected to them, realizing you do have a choice, thinking it through rationally over and over. And your new paradigm is you're just free, like you're good, you trust yourself. You realize that for all those years there's nothing wrong with you. It's just you'd been fed misinformation on the internet and maybe naively took that stuff about the blockers and took the stuff about removing the triggers and all that shit, and it just messed you up for a little while. But you can get out, you can change the paradigm, you can shift the scales, you can get free. All of this is possible. If you want to learn how to do this, then feel free to book in a free discovery call with me. I'll leave a link below. Thank you for listening. Hopefully this can kind of shift your perspective on things a little bit, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.